Hi there, Chris from TotallyEV, and here we're doing a dedicated audio review of the Kia Soul EV. If you want more details of the vehicle itself and indeed our in-depth review of the car, do check it out on your pop-up banner or indeed down in the description below. Now, in terms of the audio configuration of the Soul EV, it's pretty staggering that Kia has integrated a 10-speaker Harman Kardon system, which effectively comes as standard. There's no way of upgrading it. Now you've got 640 watts of power and you've got 10 speakers, as I mentioned before. Oddly, there's 7 drivers at the front of the cabin and 2 at the rear, and of course the 10th and last one is the subwoofer, which is in the boot. It would have been potentially nice to see the manufacturer integrating more drivers at the rear. Now at the front, what you'll find is there's one center speaker, which is found in terms of the dashboard. You've got 2 tweeters positioned in the A-pillars, and then you've got 2 drivers positioned in each of the front doors. Now the front and the rear doors have woofer drivers, which do really try and reproduce that low-end shunt, and of course the low-end extension is continued via the subwoofer in the boot. Now in terms of connecting up to the audio system and of course I say the infotainment system, you can connect over a wired connection via Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. If however you choose a wireless connection, you've got the SBC and AAC codecs to play around with, the latter being the better out of the two, so it's great to see that the manufacturer has integrated this. Now through the infotainment system you can play around with different settings. Now your settings might differ from mine if you do own the vehicle or you have listened to it, for example, and had a demo of it, but in terms of the advanced configuration, I effectively had the Quantum Logic Surround as reference. You can choose audience or on stage, but I just do find that it brings a little bit of an artificial sound. As for the equalizer, I've reduced the bass by 1 notch, added 5 to the mid and taken 2 off the treble. We'll talk about why throughout this review and in terms of the audio quality of this section of this review. But before doing that, I'm going to give you a little snippet of how the system performs and place the microphone and the camera in 4 separate locations and play back a song, and it's from Priya J. In case you're interested, her song is called Falling and it'll be down in the description below.
When I reach the brink, don't stop to think. I always sing, and now I'm thinking it's my imagination. It's constantly racing 1,000 miles ahead. I'm living in my own mind, but it's floating. I'm always hoping. But when I reach the brink, don't stop to think. I always sing, and now
Now I appreciate listening to an audio demo over YouTube that's probably being compressed and via a set of microphones isn't ideal, and ultimately you might be here for my subjective opinion. So let's get into it. First off, that sub-bass extension. Now that 200mm driver that's located in the boot really does deliver that low-end extension, and it can really be heard. If you're listening to, let's say, some EDM music, you're going to really hear that progressive bass line, and it's very much appreciated, at least in my books. In comparison to other stock systems, well, most of them don't include a subwoofer, completely flat out, and for those which even do include it as an option, well, I don't think they can really compete even with the likes of the Kia Soul EV's stock Harman Kardon subwoofer. Now, as for the mid bass, well, it's plentiful. I reduced 1 notch in terms of the bass because I do like a good bass line to be heard and felt, but it was absolutely outstanding at the front and at the rear of the cabin because each of the doors are fitted with these woofer drivers, 160mm from memory, and as a result, it gives you real good shunt in terms of that mid bass reproduction. I will say it's a touch uncontrolled and I would have liked a little bit more finesse, but for the sheer amount of quantity that you get, I think you'll be left, well, pretty entertained. Now with all that mid-bass presence, the mids do take a hit, and here you'll get a little bit of a V-shaped sound signature and one that's recessed and pushed back. Now you can EQ it through the infotainment system, which is somewhat surprising. The reason I say that is because when you do tinker around the mid-range, often you'll find that sound systems give you a negative audio reproduction and doesn't give you a lifelike accurate reproduction of what the artist is trying to portray. Now thankfully that's not the case with the Soul EV, at least to an extent, so you can get at mid-range a little bit better. Now at the front of the cabin, this is definitely a plus point because you have got these mid-range drivers which are positioned within the doors, and then you've got the tweeters for the high-end frequencies. However, at the rear of the cabin, no matter how much you're going to be EQing it, the woofer drivers don't really benefit that much from the EQ, and therefore the mid-range is kind of lost at the back. The same could be said about the highs, where there's a lack of tweeters that are found at the rear of the cabin, and therefore you won't get that zing. At the front of the cabin, however, you do get quite an accentuated kind of sibilant, almost harsh type of sound, and that's because of the tweeters that are positioned within the A-pillars. Now in my case, I reduced it by 2 notches via the treble EQ, and therefore meant that the sound was a little bit more bearable. Of course, it might depend in terms of your own hearing range and what you prefer, but in my case I found that having it at its 0 setting, or indeed even dialing up the treble, made for a little bit of an unpleasant experience, specifically when you're driving at speed and you're trying to cancel out the cabin noise which the Soul EV is kind of succumbed to, and as a result means that at louder volumes the system becomes a little bit unbearable at its default EQ. Now onto its soundstage, it's a little bit close sounding, which is a bit surprising given the fact that you've got 9 audio drivers within the cabin, and the 10th, if you remember, is the subwoofer. Even at the front of the cabin, where there's 7 audio drivers, one might think that you're going to get a good width and depth, but that's not quite the case. You get a little bit more of an intimate sound, and while that's not necessarily a bad thing, I was just expecting a little bit more from Harman Kardon / Kia. At the rear of the cabin, this is further emphasized, where you've only got 2 audio drivers to contend with, and as a result the width and depth just feels a little bit close sounding, and the sound doesn't come as well as much as you would want it to do. Now, on the plus side, the instrument separation and the imaging that you get is absolutely fantastic. I think here, specifically at the front of the cabin, you're going to have a fantastic, joyous experience. So no matter what music you're listening to, be it from classical to jazz, rock music, EDM, R&B, you're going to have a great sort of sense of instruments hitting from left and right throughout the cabin, and well, it's going to leave you with a smile on your face. And really, this is what I'm trying to convey in this review. The audio system is going to keep you joyous, and it's going to keep you really happy in terms of what you're getting as a standard stock system. And it's really impressive to see what Kia have integrated here. I will go as far as saying that as far as stock systems go, and what comes as standard and therefore doesn't have to have an additional option for its price point, this is arguably one of the best stock systems out there on the market. And while it won't compete with the likes of the Polestar 2 or the Tesla Model 3, which in my opinion offer the superior audiophile experience and the audiophile journey, I still should definitely commend what Kia and Harman Kardon have achieved at this price point in the Soul EV. And as a result, it gets our Best Buy award, even though you can't theoretically buy the sound system. But of course, that's just my opinion and thoughts about the audio system. I'll be intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, so do let us know what you make of it. And of course, if you like this video, give it a like, subscribe to see more, and favourite and share, as it always helps the channel grow. Alright, I've been Chris from TotallyEV. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.